Some stories disappear, some are erased, and some are waiting to be uncovered. The Dark Bureau.
Faith, for countless people, is an interior world, a personal leap into transcendent meaning and solace. It animates the daily rhythms of life and anchors communities in hope. But in the contemporary landscape of global megachurches, private devotion is not simply a matter of personal belief. It is intricately interwoven with unprecedented flows of wealth, forming an international system that transforms spiritual yearning into financial assets with astonishing ease and scale. In this world, a single digital transfer, sparked by a plea for healing or an inspiration for abundance, moves instantly through sophisticated payment processes, tumbling between bank accounts, shell corporations, and shadowy business partners. The spectacle visible to millions, beamed live from stadium pulpits or scrolled past on social media, is only the most conspicuous layer of a financial architecture as methodically engineered as any multinational enterprise. At the centre of this system is the prosperity gospel, a doctrine that fuses the ambitions of spiritual aspiration with the logic and instruments of high finance. Within its framework, prayer is reimagined as a form of investment, and personal transformation is linked to measurable returns, not only of faith, but of material wealth. This ideology, now globally influential and adaptable to national contexts, underpins a network that converts charity and individual devotion into dispersed but enormous fortunes. Its surface is relentlessly familiar. Viral clips of dramatic healings, exclusive holy artifacts sold through digital storefronts, a torrent of phone banking appeals reverberating in midnight infomercials. But behind this stage-managed energy lies an invisible infrastructure, the machinery of compliance, regulation, and business strategy that powers enormous, unregulated flows of capital and shields them from institutional scrutiny. Leadership within these ministries is less a function of spiritual succession than one of dynastic strategy. Boardrooms adorned in equal measure with religious iconography and financial pie charts are populated by family clans and long-time confidants who cross-hold seats in both non-profit and commercial arms. Their planning is granular, global expansion mapped alongside analytics reports, mass events coordinated with advertising blitzes, donor outreach structured around psychological profiling and geospatial targeting. Ministries become conglomerates in all but name. By leveraging the unique privileges afforded to religious organisations, including broad non-profit exemptions and favourable local tax treatments, they are able to skirt the rigorous transparency and reporting obligations imposed on other large charities or businesses. Top-tier legal and financial specialists assemble deeply tiered chains of trusts and holding companies to shuffle revenue and liabilities, ensuring maximum protection from outside probes while optimising pathways for asset growth and risk management. The worshippers, those who fill colossal halls or connect from distant screens, encounter an experience designed to feel personal and immediate. Digital giving platforms remove all friction, integrating with mobile wallets and social media, while emotionally charged testimonials flow in real time. Affiliates don't merely offer worship, but tangible life resources, microloans for the needy, financial and career counselling, even medical clinics, all of which feed digital records back to a central data core. This emotional and practical engagement is relentlessly harvested, producing metrics that guide algorithmic marketing. Each local and global sermon, each viral healing story, is algorithmically weighted and repackaged for maximum audience resonance, transforming spiritual energy into predictable, scalable revenue. The sophistication of this approach allows the organisation to multiply community enthusiasm into measurable profit, while constructing dense layers of legal and technical insulation that delay or stymie external inquiry. Dig deeper, and the structure's intricate complexity emerges. Ownership webs cross not just legal entities, but entire continents. Real estate portfolios are split across dozens of shell companies, islands of secrecy and shielding, with end beneficiaries deliberately obscured. Profits shuttle between ministries and businesses, relabelled as management fees, consulting contracts, or mission support transfers. Tax efficiency is a global endeavour. Money travels through countries granting religious exemptions, then is recycled as loans to related entities or repatriated as fresh ministry income, with charitable status invoked both to shield and to legitimise. Each gift, whether a handful of bills collected in a township or a six-figure transfer from a corporate sponsor, disappears into this network, multiplying and mutating through reinvestment while obscuring its journey from donor to destination. For regulators or watchdogs, the task of unravelling this machine is Sisyphean. Agencies in the US, Brazil, Nigeria and beyond find themselves with limited jurisdiction, piecemeal regulatory tools and little access to real-time data. Financial investigators describe a high-stakes chess match. Accounts seized or flagged in one country are quietly replaced or rerouted in another, as lobbyists work to exploit the legal ambiguities afforded to religious institutions. The result is a regulatory hall of mirrors, where subpoenas are met with diplomatic protests and legal firewalls. Watchdog organisations labour to follow the money, but their efforts are hindered by bank secrecy laws, anonymous charitable trusts, and patchworks of mutually incompatible international agreements. In practice, even with clear evidence, prosecution or meaningful reform remains rare. A core organisational logic animates the prosperity gospel machine. It builds cycles of mutual reinforcement where faith and material gain become intertwined incentives. Community uplift projects, microloans, healthcare outreach, skills training centres function not just as altruism, but as lifelong recruitment and data engines. Each interaction produces new contacts, testimonials, and potential donor profiles, feeding into the larger pool that sustains the machine's norm of relentless growth. Expanding broadcast networks and satellite campuses proliferate more than spiritual influence. They also claim market share, local attention, and ever-new sources of revenue. The machine's public rhetoric shifts nimbly to suit regulatory and cultural expectations, emphasising prosperity and breakthrough in North America, miraculous healing in Africa, or justice and transformation in Latin America. Blending the language of faith with whatever legal framework or market opportunity presents itself. Yet, as financial and journalistic scrutiny grows, fissures appear. Whistleblowers leak internal emails, contracts, and encrypted transaction logs, revealing a machine that prizes strategic coordination above chaotic inspiration. Campaign calendars and board presentations expose how mass rallies are structured as fundraising blitzes, each carefully mapped with donation psychology and scripted testimonies. Analyses of compensation show that bonuses, property purchasing, and other incentives correlate not to program success, but to short-term fundraising goals. The system functions less as a loose network of ministries than as a finely tuned multinational, committed to expansion and risk management at every level. Attempts to pierce the shell are largely frustrated by institutionalized opacity. Auditors who are meant to provide accountability may serve on the boards they are charged to regulate, or are engaged only for narrow, partial reviews. Donors asking for transparency are routed into bureaucratic loops or threatened with legal action. Religious liberty, framed as core to democratic life, becomes a shield wielded against public investigation, with authorities warning of constitutional challenges or voter backlash. The result is a system that, even as its conduct is increasingly questioned, resists reform. Where new legislation is floated, implementation is slow. By the time enforcement approaches, assets and leadership structures have shifted, evading meaningful oversight. Political actors, heavily invested in both the symbolic power and the donation streams this system generates, are reluctant to intervene or pursue meaningful disclosure legislation. Developers eyeing lucrative property deals and banks eager for consistent revenue rarely object to continued expansion. On the ground, the consequences for communities are profound and deeply destabilising. Disillusioned donors, realising years of sacrifice, have gone to enrich a handful of insiders or backstop global speculation, organise class actions, press criminal charges, or form advocacy groups. In parallel, the core loyalists view investigations as attacks on faith itself, mobilising networks to defend the leaders and the institution. Congregations split, with some remaining fiercely loyal and others dissolving or devolving into internal conflict. The emotional toll is heavy. Stories abound of individuals pushed to bankruptcy, families torn apart over financial disagreements, and waves of depression and mistrust when promises of transformation fail to materialise. Societies that once depended on these ministries for basic social support find themselves facing vacuums, as both trust and resources collapse, and neither religious nor secular authorities fill the breach. Institutional responses are fragmented, politically charged, and, for the most part, slow to adapt. In North America, Africa, and South America, regulatory bodies occasionally freeze charitable accounts or suspend business licenses. But such actions are frequently undermined by lack of cross-border coordination and underfunded enforcement agencies. Some parliaments debate enhanced reporting and disclosure requirements for religious charities, while others resist, citing broad constitutional protections for religious practice and warning of chilling effects. Whistleblowers often face concerted retaliation, ranging from public vilification to threats of violence and exile. Yet news of their revelation spreads, fueling informal networks of investigative journalists, reformist lawyers, and survivor communities. The global banking sector is stirred into action. Under pressure from advocacy coalitions and regulatory reviews, major banks strengthen due diligence regimes for religiously affiliated entities and begin to demand clear, beneficial ownership disclosures. Watchdog NGOs pool resources, creating pan-national data clearinghouses and expert panels to track funds and issue alert lists. At the same time, academic and legal communities engage in contentious debate. How much regulation is too much? What oversight is both effective and respectful of religious freedom? The reputation and operation of faith-based media platforms shift, with some facing deplatforming by major social media companies for non-compliance with transparency directives. The families and communities affected become case studies for both the psychological consequences of faith-based overgiving and the systematic under-regulation of charitable entities with enormous financial reach. A new consensus emerges. The prosperity gospel is no longer just a matter of controversial personal theology, but a systemic risk point at the intersection of belief, persuasion, and unregulated international finance. The boundaries between spiritual conviction and fiscal exploitation blur, imposing new strains on society's ability to protect vulnerable individuals while preserving core rights. The miracle of the prosperity gospel is not its promise of abundance, but its agility, the capacity to continually retool, remonetize, and reinvent, always one step ahead of scrutiny and policy. As nations labour to patch regulatory loopholes and survivor groups raise their voices, larger questions come to the fore. How do pluralistic societies value both religious liberty and financial integrity? What boundaries, if any, can hold in a world where faith and finance are welded together, programmed, and optimised for global scale? The stakes, as the prosperity gospel machine continues to evolve, extend well beyond doctrinal disputes. literally touching the lives, bank accounts, and futures of millions. As the curtain falls on each chapter of exposure and reform, one truth becomes inescapable. The machine endures, morphs, and persists, challenging laws, communities, and imaginations for generations to come.